Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Minoans, Europe's first civilization, and the mystery of its sudden death. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In 1900, British archaeologist Arthur Evans began excavating a low hill on the northern coast of Crete and found something that rewrote European prehistory. Beneath his spade lay a palace of 300 rooms spread across 22,000 square meters, fitted with indoor plumbing, decorated with frescoes of dolphin-filled seas and young athletes vaulting over charging bulls, and full of clay tablets inscribed in a script no one had ever seen. Europe's first civilization had been hiding 500 years beneath a Cretan field. The Minoans, named by Evans after the mythological King Minos, flourished from approximately 3000 to 1450 BC. At their peak, they controlled trade across the Aegean and beyond, maintaining palaces at Knossos, Phaistos, and Malia, and colonies as far as Santorini and Rhodes. Then, around 1450 BC, every palace on Crete except Knossos was simultaneously destroyed. Within a generation, the palace of Knossos itself fell, and the script on its tablets changed entirely, from the still-undeciphered linear to the linear B of the Mycenaean Greeks. Europe's first civilization ended in a historical blink. The question of how and why has never been conclusively answered, and the script at the center of it all has never been read. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the broader phenomenon of lost civilizations, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. The ocean has a long memory. As the last ice age ended around 12,000 years ago, sea levels worldwide rose by more than 120 meters, enough to drown entire coastal civilizations that may have flourished along shorelines that no longer exist. The continental shelves that now lie submerged beneath shallow coastal seas were once habitable land. River deltas, bays, and estuaries that today lie underwater were once the most attractive real estate on Earth, rich in resources, temperate in climate, and accessible by sea. If ancient peoples built their settlements where resources were most abundant, then much of the archaeological record of early civilization may be sitting on the ocean floor, invisible to conventional excavation. This is not speculation. Marine archaeologists have already found submerged ruins at dozens of locations worldwide, off the coasts of India, Japan, Cuba, and the Mediterranean islands. In some cases, these structures are clearly artificial: stone walls, carved steps, and rectilinear platforms that could not have formed naturally. The academic debate is not whether these structures exist, but what they mean. Were they built by unknown pre-flood cultures, or were they coastal settlements of known civilizations gradually abandoned as waters rose? The answer, in many cases, remains open. What oral traditions add to this picture is equally significant. Cultures living on or near the sea throughout the tropics and subtropics carry remarkably consistent flood narratives, stories of a great inundation that drowned an earlier world. These are not borrowed from one another through colonial contact. They predate European exploration. They appear to be independent memories of a shared catastrophe, the end of the last ice age, when the world coastlines changed forever and entire ways of life were drowned. The civilizations that built on those shores, if they existed, vanished beneath the waves. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns, in science, demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Minoans, Europe's first civilization, and the mystery of its sudden death is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Minoan civilization flourished on the island of Crete from approximately 3000 to 1450 BC, with its peak palatial period running from around 1900 to 1450 BC. The Palace of Knossos, excavated by Arthur Evans from 1900 onwards, covers 22,000 square meters across multiple stories and included indoor plumbing fed by a gravity flow aqueduct, storage magazines holding hundreds of large ceramic jars, elaborate throne rooms, and walls decorated with vivid frescoes depicting marine life, religious ceremonies, and athletic contests. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered Linear A, the primary writing system of the Minoans, is inscribed on clay tablets, stone vessels, and metal objects at sites across Crete and the Aegean islands. Despite being one of the most intensively studied undeciphered scripts in the world, it has resisted translation for over 120 years. The breakthrough decipherment of Linear B, a related Mycenaean script, by Michael Ventris in 1952, proved that Linear B recorded an early form of Greek, but Linear A appears to record a completely different, unrelated language with no known relatives. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine the Minoan bull-leaping fresco from Knossos, depicting young athletes, male and female, seizing the horns of a charging bull and vaulting over its back, is one of the most celebrated images from the ancient world. Whether bull-leaping was a religious ritual, an athletic competition, or a dangerous sport remains debated. The activity appears repeatedly in Minoan art and may have inspired the Greek myth of Theseus and the Minotaur, which ancient sources set in the labyrinthine palace of Knossos. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the volcanic island of Thera, modern Santorini, erupted in one of the largest volcanic events of the Holocene, now dated to approximately 1620 BC by ice core analysis and radiocarbon dating, though some scholars place it slightly later. The eruption destroyed the Minoan colony at Akrotiri on Thera, preserving it under volcanic ash in a state sometimes compared to Pompeii. The eruption generated tsunamis reaching Crete and may have deposited volcanic ash over the island's agricultural land. But the Minoan civilization survived it by at least 150 years. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the Minoan collapse occurred around 1450 BC, when every palatial center on Crete, except Knossos, was simultaneously destroyed by fire. At Knossos itself, linear B tablets, in Mycenaean Greek rather than linear A, appear in the archaeological record after the destruction horizon, indicating that Mycenaean Greeks occupied and administered the palace after the collapse. This transition from linear A to linear B at Knossos is the key stratigraphic evidence for a Mycenaean takeover of Minoan Crete. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: DNA analysis of ancient Minoan skeletal remains, published in 2013 by a team led by George Stamatoyianopoulos of the University of Washington, established that the Minoans were not, as some 19th century scholars proposed, migrants from North Africa or the Near East. The genetic profile of ancient Minoans closely resembles that of modern European populations, particularly those of the Aegean region, confirming that the Minoans were indigenous Europeans and not a transplanted Near Eastern civilization. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Minoans, Europe's first civilization, and the mystery of its sudden death. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that Spiridon Marinados proposed in 1939 that the thorough volcanic eruption destroyed Minoan civilization through a combination of tsunamis, ashfall, and regional climate disruption. This theory captured popular imagination and linked the Minoans to the Atlantis legend. The main objection is chronological. Current dating places the thorough eruption around 1620 BC, approximately 170 years before the Minoan collapse at 1450 BC, a gap too large for a single volcanic event to have been the direct cause of palatial destruction. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the Mycenaean invasion theory, supported by the linear B evidence at Knossos and comparative palace destructions, holds that mainland Greek warriors used the Minoans' post-thorough weakness to invade Crete, destroy the CES, and replace the Minoan administration with their own. Archaeologists Sandy McGillivray and others support this interpretation. The main objection is that the destruction patterns at different sites are not uniform enough to indicate a coordinated military campaign. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that a synthesis championed by Sinclair Hood and others argues that the Thera eruption weakened Minoan economic and political structures over several generations, disrupting trade, reducing agricultural yields, and undermining the palatial elite's authority, leaving Crete vulnerable to Mycenaean opportunism by 1450 BC. The two-stage collapse model explains the chronological gap between Thera and the final destruction, but critics argue it combines two uncertain hypotheses without independently verifying either. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Minoans, Europe's first civilization, and the mystery of its sudden death does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes tsunami deposit layers in coastal sediment cores from sites along the northern coast of Crete, studied by geologists including Hendrik Bruins of Ben-Gurion University, contain coarse marine sediment deposited above Minoan occupation levels, consistent with a large tsunami event. If confirmed as a Thera-generated tsunami, these deposits would provide physical evidence of direct Minoan impact from the eruption, supporting at least a partial role for Thera in the events leading to the 1450 BC collapse. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented the site of Akrotiri on Thera, excavated since 1967 by Spiridon Marinados and continued by Christos Daumas, preserves a complete Minoan town sealed under volcanic ash and pumice from the 1620 BC eruption. Multi-story buildings with sophisticated drainage, wall paintings of extraordinary quality, and linear inscriptions have been recovered intact. Crucially, no human remains or valuables were found, suggesting the inhabitants evacuated before the final eruption, indicating warning signs that the Minoans could detect and respond to. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed linear B tablets recovered from the Palace of Knossos by Evans and subsequently analyzed by Michael Ventris and John Chadwick established that Mycenaean Greek administrators were running Knossos after 1450 BC, recording inventories of sheep, grain, and military equipment in a completely different language from the linear of earlier Minoan administration. The abrupt script change in the same palace's administrative records is the clearest and most direct evidence of a cultural discontinuity at Knossos consistent with a Mycenaean takeover. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Minoans, Europe's first civilization, and the mystery of its sudden death. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Linear remains undeciphered, and without new bilingual texts, a Minoan Rosetta Stone, it is likely to stay that way. The 2013 DNA study established the Minoans as European, resolving one old debate, while the core collapse question remains open. Acriterion Thera continues to yield extraordinary finds and is now one of the premier Bronze Age sites in Europe. The chronological gap between the Thera eruption and the Minoan collapse is the central unresolved problem. If 170 years separates the two events, Thera was not the direct cause. If the dating of one or both events contains systematic error, as some researchers argue, the picture changes entirely. The Minoans remain, in the truest sense, a civilization whose voice has not yet been heard. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Minoans, Europe's first civilization, and the mystery of its sudden death, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Minoan civilization ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.